What's up, y'all? It's Brian. We're back for another Tuesday live stream. We're back. The brand is enduring. One of the things is I asked the audience specifically what kind of content you want to hear about, and I got a couple of different answers. I've been running tests on YouTube. The thing that people seem to be really responding to is stuff about pricing strategy. So on this episode, we're going to talk about you got your first management gig. Now what? Um, I will be doing some more pricing strategy ones. I'm just playing with y'all. And so that's what I have on today's episode. I'm going to go ahead and roll the intro, and then we're going to dive into this. We're back. Again, like I said, the brand is enduring. We're trying out new things. And so, and I want to come in a little bit more prepared so you guys get a little bit more out of these. And so I'm kind of structuring these like I do it with my podcast and things that I plan to recut into YouTube videos. And so I wanted to add a little bit of structure. So I do have a small outline I'm going to be working off of, but I'm going to be telling you about my experience as my first management gig, and really the stuff I wish that somebody would have told me, and maybe give you some tips. Especially this is great if you're new and you just got hired on in your first supervisory gig where you actually have staff directly reporting to you. And really, I want to make sure that you don't go in over your head, because there's a lot of stuff out there, but it sounds strange, but there's not a lot of stuff out there for new managers. It kind of speaks, a lot of the material out there speaks as if you've been a manager for a while, but nothing says, okay, so what do you do first? And so that's what I want to use today's live stream for. If you have any comments or anything, go ahead and hop in the comments. Make sure that you leave your name so I know who you are. So we're going to roll into this, and I will speak to your comments as they pop up. So first things first. My journey before I landed in the management seat was, my first real job was working in a group home. And really it was kind of a management job, except I was managing 8 to 10 teenagers. And, I learned some serious management skills there. How to resolve conflicts was a lot of it. Task management, making sure that people were where they're supposed to be and doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so I did learn some management skills there. I left that one and moved into case management with the state. And after I was thoroughly chewed up with that one, I was offered an opportunity to be a shift supervisor with my own group home with a population of kids that had never really been served at the specific level, at the specific agency, at that specific level before. And that was my first dive, my first entree into the management world. Now, the most important thing, first things first, when you land a management job, you got your first management job. Once you get past the excitement of finally making it, you've made it into the illustrious world of middle management. You don't quite have enough power to make real decisions that improve everybody's life, but you have the power to make decisions that ruin everybody's life. That's kind of the middle management world, but you've made it. You're there. You're proudly standing tall as a middle manager officially. The most important thing I can tell you from experience is this: when you get your first management job, the very first thing you need to do is go and see if your company has any kind of management training available. The reason why is twofold. You want to see if your company has any management classes or anything available. One, because it's going to give you a good framework to start off of. But two, you're going to learn what your company's expectations of managers are, because every company has different expectations and things from their management team. And so you want to go seek those things out, especially if they don't provide them to you up front. You need to ask for them, figure out where there's materials or training or anything for managers. Like I said, you want to learn what your company's management style is, what the preferred management style is in terms of reporting, like supervision and things along those lines. But you also want to know how they develop managers and what they expect you to do at different phases. Because even though you've made it to management, especially if you're in that middle management seat, you have people that you report to, and they're tracking your progress too. So you want to make sure that your efforts are in line with what the company standards are. And so that was a piece that was not revealed to me nor the other two supervisors that were brought in around the same time. And we found that we were getting held accountable for things that we weren't really ever trained on. And I think everybody was new for the most part, except one or two people, but pretty much everybody was new and nobody really knew what to do in that position. And so it was just kind of a crapshoot. And we found ourselves in the position where we were actually getting held accountable for things that we weren't really told that we were supposed to do. Supervision models that we weren't following, specific documentation that we didn't know existed. And it could have been a catastrophic situation. And it kind of was for that first, year or so, because everybody was flying by the seat of their pants until somebody said, hey, there is management training available. And we're like, oh, okay, well, that helps to actually learn how they supervise managers here. And so, like I said, the most important thing is seek out whatever management training that your company has available. Teaches you how to do the basics of management and also teaches you what your company's expectations of managers are. That is important. The second one is probably more important because every company has different things that they expect of their managers. All right. So you're in there, and I have a couple of books I can recommend. I will throw it out there. I'm gonna wait till we get a couple more eyes on the stream before I do it. But there's a couple of books I can recommend that can help you out with that piece of it. Once you've taken the management course and you have kind of some frameworks of what your company expects, now's the time to start figuring out what your management style is. And you may already have a management style that works for you or what you think is going to work for you, but really figure out how you want to be as a manager. I know some people can't manage without being micromanagers. And I don't want to say, well, that's okay, but it's figuring out how to tailor your approach so you're not overwhelming your employees or making them feel belittled or anything. Others are kind of the hands-off managers, try it and see, and then we'll give you feedback along the way. That's kind of my style. I want to see what somebody's capable of before I jump in there and start trying to steer them one way or the other, because I do have a proclivity to overteach. And so I want to get them in the water and kind of see what they're able to do and give them gentle guidance along the way and say, hey, try this, pull this one back, dial this one back, and really hone their style based on what strengths they're bringing in. It's more of a strength-based kind of thing, because if I'm the hiring manager, I'm kind of assessing what the strengths were. And I have those kind of logged as, this person seems like they can think quick on their feet. This person's verbose. It feels like they're an effective communicator. And so I have an idea of kind of what skills you're bringing in the door. I want to figure out how I can leverage your strengths a little bit to help develop you, and use your strengths to develop your weaknesses. Others are really like the old school, and I hate to say it, but some people really do have that super authoritarian drill sergeant kind of management style. And I don't want to say it's completely ineffective, but you also have to be able to temper that for the audience that you have. I can name very specifically being under one of those kind of managers, and it did not work with my personality. And I'm gonna get into the personality piece too, because that's something that does matter. Your management approach should have enough flexibility that it can vary to address the types of personalities you're interacting with. And even if you are kind of the chill manager, there may be a time where you do have to address a behavior with a worker or whatnot, and you're going to have to actually be a little bit more confrontational. And so it's figuring out when and where to do that kind of stuff. Like I said, you're going to develop your own style. So you're going to take that training and figure out, okay, how does this suit my personality and how I communicate? Because at the end of the day, really management, effective management, in my estimation, now I'm not talking CEO level, manager of hundreds and hundreds of people in departments. I'm talking about direct line, I have 30 staff reporting to me, and I might have a layer of management in between myself and the staff. That's as high as I've been. But effective communication is really good management. A lot of times the things that you communicate, the way you communicate them, dictate how things get done and tracked. So what your role is as a manager. Now, this is going to vary. Your mileage will vary depending on where you are. For some people, it's going to look different. You're going to have more things and more actual hard data to track. For other people, it's going to be really kind of an observational thing where you're shaping it through observations. It really depends on where you are and what the management expectations are for the place that you're at. But your duties are to basically, in my estimation, in my way of managing, my role was to try to help my workers be successful and remove obstacles that they couldn't remove themselves to their success. That's how I viewed management. My job was not to get in there and make sure they did everything perfectly. My job was not get in there and make sure they did everything my way. My job was to remove the barriers that were keeping them from being successful in their own ways and keep them in accordance with what the program standards were, because that was another important layer to it. We could have our goals and what our expectations are, but they still have to be in accordance to whatever the program wanted at the time. And so I had to figure out a way to intermingle all those. And I wasn't perfect at it. I struggled with it too. And I'll talk about my specific struggles with it probably on another a different live stream, because there's a lot of other stuff that was going on behind the scenes. But again, it's figuring out what figuring out what goals you have for your staff, and then figuring out how you can help them meet the goals. And then, of course, monitoring team performance and reporting that and communicating that information to the people above you. And again, it's going to vary depending on where you're at and what the structure of the organization above you looks like. So these are really general things, and a lot of it's really speaking from just what my experience is. Now, you got to figure out if you're going to be in the leader position or the management position, and you can intermingle the two. They're not mutually exclusive. The managers are more task focused. You're going to focus on the day-to-day completion of tasks and making sure that all the boxes are checked. And you're looking at processes and performance. Leaders are more inspirational. And so their job is to motivate. And so when I'm talking about your style, for me, the style was a blend of the two. More on the leadership side, at least I tried, but definitely it wasn't as task driven, just because my mind doesn't think in a straight line, and task management has always been a difficult thing for me. And so I had to figure out a way to get my task done and hold my staff accountable for their tasks. But their job wasn't simply a bunch of tasks. They were interacting with human beings. And so sometimes specific tasks that can get de-emphasized. But there are times where you're dealing with things that are sensitive, or there's a specific process to do things. And so you don't really have that option. So I understand that other side of things. Now, transitioning, because the transition to the managerial role is tough. And I'm going to explain to you why. And there's a couple of different reasons why you're tough, and a couple of different reasons why it's tough. And there's a couple of different factors that play into this. Are you coming from are you a manager that's being hired from the outside? That has a unique set of challenges versus the person that has come up through the ranks. And that has a unique set of challenges. So we're going to dive into both of those. If you're the manager that's being brought in from the outside, you have to acclimate to the company culture. The struggle I had was I wanted to come in and give everybody a chance. I did. I really wanted to give even the staff that had multiple issues and, lower performing here and low performing there. I really wanted to give them a chance. And that was to my detriment in one major case, because I got the feed, basically I was told, hey, this person has been struggling. It would be it would make sense if you let them go. And I said, no, I want to give them a shot. I'm gonna see if being under a different management style worked. And instead of listening to the people saying, we've tried everything and nothing works, I went ahead and tried, and ended up biting me in the rear. I'll be honest with you. But I was the manager from the outside, and I was bringing in a different perspective, a fresher perspective, and a different methodology of doing things. And so, being from the outside, I brought in an outside perspective, and I had trouble adjusting with my perspective of how I wanted things done. I had it was a difficulty adjusting to how things were done within the company, if that makes sense. And prior to me coming aboard, there were, and I'm talking about my last management job. So the structure of this job was, I was the director. I had two managers underneath me, and then they each had staff that they managed. And so I came in, and I had, what had worked for me previously at other places, from a scheduling perspective, from a supervision perspective, from staff development perspective. And there was a different methodology for doing things because I had fewer resources to do it. And so I'm coming in, and the manager before me, that was directly before me, was just like, reactive, super reactive, didn't address behaviors with kids, because it was a youth shelter. And so she didn't really address behaviors with kids until it kind of like got out of control, and then the bottom was falling out. And so now we're all in crisis mode, and we're all addressing crisis behaviors. And that was kind of how staff operated. They didn't take action until the crisis started. And I was trying to get proactive in mitigating the crisis. Also, not a lot of addressing staff behaviors in terms of interaction with kids. And so what happened was there was a level, and it wasn't pervasive, but there was a level of authoritarianism running in the staff when it came to interacting with some of the population. And so we had to weed some of that out. But before that manager, and they were short-termed, the one before that was Mr. Everything that happens, every crisis that pops up, I'm on the floor working next to staff, trying to put out everything. And it's really almost a martyr syndrome, if that makes sense, where they would constantly martyr themselves to go out and do everything. And there was almost no expectation for the staff to handle stuff because they were so used to going out there and handling everything. And I had actually been that manager before, and I learned my lesson pretty quickly. Because what happens is when you're in that position where you are the stopgap, you're the one that goes out, somebody calls in, okay, you're out there covering their shift, instead of putting the onus on the supervisor that handles the scheduling to figure out what to do when somebody calls in. You're just automatically out there all the time, 100%. What happens is the other tasks, the higher level administrative tasks that you're supposed to be doing on a day-to-day basis, completely go away. And you end up spending most of your time doing the work that you've hired other people to do. And if you're going to do their work, then what's the point of having these other people that you've hired? And that brought me into conflict with the staff that was under that person, because they expected me to do the same thing. And I already been down that road, and I saw where it went. At the time when I came in, we were getting ready to get our accreditation. And so I had an ungodly amount of paperwork that I had to get done on a day-to-day basis to bring the shelter into compliance, with what the accreditation council was looking like, and it wasn't like they were completely out of compliance with all this other stuff. I'm not painting that picture, but what I am saying is there was a lot of work to do that was administrative stuff that I couldn't do sitting out in the unit on the floor because some staff decided that they just wanted to add some extra time to their vacation. And so my expectation of my supervisors, the managers that worked under me was, hey man, if you guys manage the schedule, if somebody calls in, you need to figure out somebody to fill it in, or you got to figure out how to cover it. And I kind of left that alone. Well, it started fomenting resentment from the managers I was supervising, because they were used to, well, the old director used to just come out here and just handle the business. And so I had to figure out from the outsider's perspective how I acclimated to that culture. Hope that makes sense. That was a long way around saying that. Now, if you're the internal person that comes up through the ranks, the thing that you really have to watch out for is that strong sense of imposter syndrome. You got to deal with jealousy of people that feel like they're more qualified and they can't believe that you got picked over them. And there's a lot of other elements that go into that. Especially if you're friends with the coworkers that you're supervising. That is one of the most difficult situations to find yourself in, because now you have to go from being the person that empathizes with your friend when the management's getting on their case to being the management that's getting on their case. It's not the easiest thing. And so drawing the line, distinguishing if you can, and even maybe talking with the people above you to say, okay, I know, I would much rather not have to manage this person. Maybe we could swap teams, maybe we can move them to a different team or whatnot, so that I am not in the position where I'm managing a friend all the time. If you can, that's great. And I've been in that position where I've managed actually a friend, and it turned out, in my mind, it turned out fine. But I understand where it can really blur some lines, and it leads the perception of favoritism and stuff. And so those are constantly things that you have to fight against. And plus, resentment if they don't really understand what your role is as the manager. It's not always easy to manage your friends. Okay. Imposter syndrome, that is pervasive in the management world, whether you're coming internal or external, where you feel like you don't know enough to be in charge of other people. That's a very hard one to deal with. And you never quite shake it. The reality is I use it almost as a metric of whether I actually deserve the position. If I feel uncomfortable or feel like, am I doing enough? Do I know enough for this? That's probably a good sign, because people who are charlatans never really feel imposter syndrome. Bullshit artists never feel imposter syndrome. They just go in and BS everybody, and they never are really held accountable. So that's not a bad thing, is what I'm saying, to actually experience that piece of it and embrace it and say, this is a sign that I'm learning, because I'm learning what the edges of my knowledge is. That's the other piece, the development piece. Again, you have to go through, and there's entire graphs and everything. And maybe the next time I'll take a deeper dive and kind of show you the progression of how people learn from managers. But there's an entire progression of where you go from your low competence, low knowledge, all the way up to high competence, high knowledge. And there's a quadrant, and there's a continuum of knowledge. And as you learn more, you learn how much you don't know, and that feeds imposter syndrome. But it's a positive thing, because the more you learn, the more you realize that you don't know. That's a good thing. The most confident people in the world are people who have no idea what they're talking about. Experts tend to be experts in their field, tend to be the ones that that judge their knowledge the lowest, if that makes sense. Okay. Setting your boundaries and expectations, that's one of the hard things, especially if you're managing friends, but just in general, because you have to set your expectations for your staff that you supervise But you also have to set expectations above you about, okay, you want me to do this, but I haven't been taught this. And so I'm expecting you to teach me this. I'm expecting you to give me enrichment opportunities for the people that are above you. So you have expectations here and expectations here for the people that report to you and the people that you report to. And so figuring out what your expectations are. I'll be really transparent with you. I did not set clear expectations with the people above me in my second management job. So I've had a couple of them. The second one, I did not set clear expectations of them. And so what happened was I was in the first year of learning my job as a supervisor and learning my documentation requirements and everything. And I allowed the people above me to keep putting more stuff on my plate, because in my mind, I thought that having all this stuff on my plate was going to somehow prove how valuable of a player I was. And I can handle this. I can handle, normally what they would do is they would kind of baby step you into, build your staff up slowly. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 staff. You might be at 2 staff for a while and they add in the third and see how well you do with the management piece of it. What I had 4 staff, all of them were new. And so I was training them while I was learning. And since I didn't set clear expectations for my learning curve, I ended up hurting myself because I ended up getting held accountable for all the stuff that I didn't know because I was spending so much time in the development phase with my staff and still trying to learn the job in and of itself. So I didn't set those boundaries and I didn't protect myself and I didn't basically ask for help for that first year. And then by the time I got to that first year, I'm sitting there, I have to do my certification and I had gotten all my staff to pass theirs, but I wasn't in a position to pass mine because I hadn't done a lot of the stuff that I needed to do because I had 4 new staff that I was training. And I'm notorious for biting off more than I can chew. I did need somebody to come along and say, okay, pump the brakes here. You don't need to have 4 new staff that you're training at the same time. That's too much, especially with this job that you're learning. We know you're coming in with a wealth of experience from other positions. We know that you already have the manager title, but you still have to learn this. And so while you're still learning, it's hard for you to have the bandwidth to teach too. I didn't set those expectations and I didn't have the clear expectations on either end of it. And so that hurt. And so I just had to be real about that. And that second management job taught me how not to throw myself into and try to solve everything myself. Taught me a little bit more about delegation of task and actually how to follow up on delegation pieces. Because before I took that management position, I thought delegation was, I give you a task and you go complete it. I didn't know that delegation actually was, I give you a task and then I ask if you understand what is being asked of you. Then I give you the expectations for what this completed task will look like. Then I ask again to make sure that you have all the tools you need to complete this task. Then I set you off to go do the task, and then you come back and report to me whether if you were able to complete it or if you encountered any hiccups along the way. And then we work towards an understanding at that point in time. I didn't know that's what delegation looked like. I thought delegation was here, thing, you take thing, go finish thing. And so that was a struggle. And learning how to delegate tasks and which tasks to delegate, that was one of the harder parts of it. And not understanding that if I delegate a task to you and you don't complete the task, but the reason why you didn't complete the task is because I did not provide you the tools, resources, information up front. That's me. That's my fault. That's on me. That's a fumble. I fumbled the task in the handoff to you. I did not give you a clean handoff. I didn't provide you the tools you needed to be successful moving forward. And so that was something that it was a hard lesson. And it's something that, you constantly learn, but it was what it was. So we've talked about that piece of it. We talked about the expectations and things like that. Communication is most of your job as a manager. Like the majority of management is actually effectively communicating, whether you're communicating tasks, you're communicating expectations, you're communicating your vision. These are different things that you have to be able to articulate. And the other part of it is making sure that there's comprehension on the other end. And even if there is consternation, there's comprehension. Does that make sense? Even though you don't necessarily agree with what I'm saying, I need you to understand what I said. You don't have to agree with what I say. As a manager, you don't have to agree with what I say, but I need you to understand what I said to you. And there's a gap between you agreeing with what somebody told you and you understanding what somebody told you. And a lot of times we get so caught up in whether they agree that we don't make sure that they understand what you said. And so that communication piece is really most of your job as a manager. Like communicating how things are supposed to be done and what expectations are takes up most of your job. And the effective communicators are the ones that are able to delegate tasks, hand them off cleanly to staff, and those tasks get done. So when the numbers are run, you're showing that your team is productive in what you're trying to do. And so specifically with that second management job I had, where I was managing family support workers, there was a lot of communication of, okay, I read the report, I read your reports in the database. We need details about this, this, and this. Or these are the corrections I'll make here, here, and here. Or I need you to explain what you meant by this and make sure that you're communicating it in your writing. Or you had this meeting, why isn't that logged in the database? Okay, so it wasn't logged in the database because you haven't had office time because you've been out in the field. Okay, so what do we need to do to give you time to actually do the paperwork? All right, so maybe we plan out a protected day where you come in, protected days, I should say, where you come in and get, your paperwork done so that we can always make sure that that box checked out. This is all communication stuff. Not a lot of specific tasks being defined, but me communicating, here's what I'm seeing, here's maybe how we can address this, try this. And so that's kind of what management is. It's mostly communication. And so if your communication isn't on point, and I'll be honest with you, my communication isn't always clear because my mind moves really, really fast. I have to spend a lot of time making sure people understand what I'm saying. Even when I'm doing these live streams, I know that that one of my verbal tics is, does that make sense? That's one of my verbal tics because I need to slow my mind down to say, okay, did what I say translate? Did the words in my brain translate and come out my mouth the right way? And those that have studied any kind of cognitive science know exactly what that means. What that actually means is talking is not the most effective way to communicate thoughts and translate them into words, but it's the only way we got. Verbal, nonverbal communication is all we got. So either you're talking with your mouth or you're talking with your hands, or written word, but even then you're still translating your thoughts and turning them into ideas. And then you're hoping that the person receiving those is able to read the words in the same way that you had them arranged in your head and make sense of them. So, like I said, management is mostly communication. And that is a huge piece of it. So if you can't really communicate, you're going to have a very difficult time in the management seat. And so it's learning what your weaknesses are as an orator, communicator, or as a writer, because there's going to be a lot of written instructions that you give, especially when you're working on staff development plans. Those are typically written out, and you're going to have to make sure that the goals that you write are very clear and the expectations you write are very clear. And so you're constantly going to be asking for input or asking for your staff to confirm whether what you said to them makes sense and they understand it. Not agree, but if they understand. Time management, there are tools out there in a box. You got to figure out what works for you. because a lot of the in the box tools for time management don't work for me. They end up becoming barriers that prevent me from actually working in the way I want to. And so I don't have any that I can recommend off the rip, but it is what it is. I don't have any that I can recommend off the top. That's what I'm saying. If you are in the management seat, a book that I can recommend is The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge. Peter Senge, and I will put it up on the screen here. Peter Senge is, he's a scientist that studies how systems interact with one another. And so the fifth discipline is really about how different systems within businesses interface with one another and understanding what it takes to have what you call a learning organization. And even if your organization falls short of that, it's even if your organization falls short of it, it's a great thing. It's a great thing to have in your toolkit. I'm about to put the book on the screen. It's a great thing to have in your toolkit so that you can aspire towards it, because it can help you structure your staff meetings. It can help you structure your supervision meetings to be super effective. And there's been multiple volumes and versions of this book. So it's worth checking out. It's called The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge. And he has a couple of other ones. I also have a couple of books by Daniel Pink, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but those are really good too. These books are good books for a manager to kind of sit down and figure out what their own specific styles are and what they prefer. So I'm gonna put it on the screen here. Do a quick screen share and show you which book I'm talking about here. But it's called The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge. And like I said, it was just a really good book to read as a supervisor. So Fifth Discipline, I'm gonna zoom in. Peter Senge. I recommend it, highly recommended book. I think it helped me out as a manager, especially when it was coming to figuring out what my style was and what I wanted my employees to get out of having me as a supervisor. Now, was it always the best and were they always receptive? No, but at least I had a good sense of the concept of how systems interface with each other. A lot of times when we talk about how cause and effect, we think about it in a straight line. I'm looking at it like this. If you're standing on the shoreline of a lake and you take a pebble and throw a pebble into that lake, you know that's going to make ripples. Having an understanding of the system theory is understanding that those ripples are going to make ripples and interface with other ripples and how these things intersect with one another, and understanding that they do hit one another and there's another event that happens after two ripples collide. Understanding what happens after the ripples collide. And knowing that your decision making doesn't occur in a box. You know, you may make a decision that seems like a small decision for you, but can be life altering for somebody that directly reports to you. And so understanding that and having grace to understand that you're not just making decisions in a box. And I almost would say a lot of people that work in places like legislative positions need to read that book to understand. People that work in, my joke was always the people of the state need to all be trained in this book, because the top office of the state, especially when it came to child and family services, they would make decisions with heedless of how those decisions affected people downstream. And then when things went wrong downstream, then of course there was a big blame game that went on. So, all right, next thing, conflict resolution. The conflict resolution piece is not easy, and it's something that we don't really lean into, but you're going to have conflicts. And sometimes conflicts are how things get done, because conflict is just really managing the miscommunication and figuring out what aren't people understanding about what you're saying, and understanding if it's a you thing or a them thing. A lot of conflicts was To be quite honest with you, I'd ask them, you know, a lot of, sorry, a lot of conflicts led into this, where it was asking, is this something that they cannot do or will not do? Is it something that they can't do or won't do? A cannot do is a teaching issue. A will not do is a discipline issue. So if they cannot do this thing that we've asked them to do, then that's on me. I need to figure out where the ball got dropped so I can make sure that they are equipped with the tools to complete the task. But if the task is given and they refuse to do the task and they know how to do it, now we're crossing over into the will not. And so now, how do we address the behavior of them not doing what's being asked of them? And then maybe start unpacking the why they're not doing X, Y, and Z. Because maybe there is a good reason that we're not fully aware of, but now we have to address that piece of it. The conflict resolution piece happens a lot when you're dealing with other people. Specifically when you have layers in between staff, there's always going to be some kind of conflict. The last management job I walked into, there were a lot of conflicts that I was not a party to that actually impacted the way that we were able to do work. And interpersonal conflicts, such and such, two staff are dating the same person, that kind of crap. But then also conflicts I created where I would come in with the expectation of policy of how we interacted with the kids, and some of the staff didn't like it. And so instead of addressing it, they left. And they weren't used to a supervisor or a director standing on their square about something when it came to a youth rights issue or safety issue for the kids. And so they were used to somebody who would just acquiesce, and I wasn't about to do that when it came to the safety of the program or the safety of the kids. Just wasn't going to do it. And so me standing on my square created conflict that actually probably needed to happen because we turned over some people behind it. Now, was I 100% right? No, I probably could handle the conflict a little bit differently with a couple of phone calls. But the end of the day was at the end of the day, the decision was going to stand regardless. I just needed to more effectively communicate it. And it went back to the communication piece. That was my fumble. But the decision was still the one that was in the best interest of the integrity of the program and integrity and the safety of the kids. So sorry if you're watching. But I could have more effectively handled the communication aspect of it. So I'll own that one. Let's see. I got to hustle through these last ones here. So the feedback, when we're addressing feedback about specific staff behaviors, the way that they have it listed out here is situation, behavior, impact. This is what the situation is. This is the behavior we saw, and this is the impact that it had. And then we figure out a way to change what the behavior was based on the situation so that we can minimize the impact. I learned a different way of putting it, but that's the way I learned after I stepped out of the management role. Setting the positive tone. Make sure you're setting the tone. If you have a big turnaround project, you can't come in and bully all the staff and everything and start throwing their weight around. And a lot of people do that because they're scared of the position. Like there's a fear of what the position is. And so they react. The reaction is, I'm gonna just call it. They're gonna get in shape. They basically come in like the drill instructor from Full Metal Jacket with staff, and instantly it creates friction. And a lot of times that's not effective because more times than not, people leave management positions all the time. That doesn't mean that somebody is underperforming. Sometimes people just leave. And so you have to come in with the understanding of what the expectations of the company is, but at the same time, when you step into that role, your job isn't to be the bully in chief and try to bully the staff into compliance. And I'm saying that as somebody who's experienced the bullying type of management style before, and basically been told that's how we teach staff is by bullying them. And that was my first time putting my boundaries up as a supervisor, and this was my first supervisor job. Put my boundaries up and say, I'm not going to try to bully my staff into compliance. I'm sorry, that's just not going to work. And I'm not saying it was an immediate thing, but at some point I realized I hit a wall where I'm like, I'm not going to do that, and that's not appropriate management. Now, in the interim, when I first stepped in, I'm like, okay, how do I get my staff to perform up to my standards? And so now I'm sitting there watching all these videos about what the alpha male does and all this other crap that doesn't really apply when you're dealing with human beings. And I realized that I'm not going to be able to try to boss my way into boss my staff into compliance. I need to motivate them. And so I had to figure out, how do I motivate them and develop them while over the top of me dealing with the bully manager. And it was that was one of the hardest parts of my life on a day-to-day basis. It was pretty dark because I loved the job. I loved the staff. I loved the program. I loved everything about going to work except going to work to deal with the person that was above me, because they're a bully. And I've never done well with bullies. My go-to with bullies was always ended up in a fist fight because I don't do well with bullies for a long time. And so that was one of the hardest moments in my life, because I have somebody that I can't necessarily go and confront the way I'm used to going to confront them. So I had to figure out other ways to deal with it. And at the end of the day, if you believe in karma worked out regarding that. And that's all I'm going to say about it. I'm not going to disparage anybody or drag anybody through the mud, but I do feel like it is worth saying that I've experienced the coercive bullying kind of management, and that was not an experience I wish on anybody. All right. Regular checking in with the staff. You're going to want to check in with your newer staff a lot more frequently than your seasoned staff, but you still need to check in with your seasoned staff too. They got to feel some connectivity between the work they're doing and you as the person in charge. Team building is really going to be dependent on the teams and stuff like that. I had 24/7 staff, and so we had shifts running around the clock. And so what felt like was rewarding for the evening staff was punishing for the day staff or the overnight staff. And so the team building really had to take place at different points of the day, and everybody was motivated by something different. One thing that really made the team feel better was better coffee and a bag of gummy bears that they could go into during the shift. That helped morale a lot. Just small things like that. But whatever's going to work for you, you got to test out different team building activities. And what's rewarding to one person is a punishment to others. Keep that in mind. Continual learning. If you have people that are really, my goal as a manager, and this is how I wasn't one of these careerist kind of people that saw this as a stepping stone. To be quite honest with you, I was planning on my first management job being my last one. This entire idea of moving up the ladder lost its luster once I finally got a job where I was kind of in charge of managing something. And my entire devotion went to managing this thing. But the way I viewed my success as a manager wasn't whether I was getting promotions left and right. It was based on whether the staff I had were attractive to other hiring managers. I wanted my workers to get hired to be supervisors and have jobs that had higher levels of responsibility. I wanted people to see the talent that I had working with me and recognize it by giving them opportunities to grow. And so that's how I viewed my worth as a manager. Am I turning out people that are going to be good managers themselves? And so I was big about mentorship. I wish I actually had a mentor in my first couple of management jobs. I had one that was good. I don't want to say that. I had one that was pretty good. The approach was a little bit different, but I really wish I had a straight line mentor to actually go to. Um, just because there's so many different things that were going on that it would have been nice to have a sounding board that was connected to what was going on. Um, but that was the benefit of it. With mentorship, a lot of times managers see the mentoring piece as, okay, your new mentor is going to take over all the stuff that I don't want to do. And that's not how you do it. You're checking in with the mentor on a constant basis to figure out what they need so that they can most benefit, so they can have a higher degree of benefit to the staff that they're mentoring. And you have to constantly hold that mentor to expectations too. And so you've added another layer to management, but you also have new responsibilities with the mentor. It's not just, okay, now you have a mentor, I wash my hands of it. That's not how that works. And then any courses or anything, I've mentioned this before, any courses that are out there, can help out. I know that you're not going to exactly learn how to manage people in a college course, in a college, in a scholastic setting, but online courses, there's plenty of them that will teach you how to be an effective manager. And specifically, if you're working at a larger company, there's always probably somewhere in the HR archives, there's probably some kind of supervisory or management training out there. I know that there's different certifications you can pursue. I can't speak to the quality of those. I don't know. I'm just saying I don't know. They may be really good and they may be worth pursuing. It's really choose your own adventure with that kind of stuff. Common mistakes: avoiding difficult conversations, trying to push it off and not have a difficult conversation, not having clear expectations. A lot of times it's a communication issue. Not setting your boundaries specifically with people above you so that they are supporting you in the way that you need as a manager is hugely important. And not adapting to the current environment. Walking in with that same, I'm a boss everybody and bully everybody into compliance stuff, it's not going to work for long. And eventually your staff will turn against you for that kind of stuff. And sometimes you may be walking into situations where it's so toxic, the staff turn against you for other things. But specifically, the fast track is where you're going to try to bully everybody into compliance. So that's all I got. If you guys like this kind of content, make sure you leave me a like and make sure you share it. If you see this even after the stream, I'm probably going to be chopping this up into a YouTube video or something along the way. But, just let me know what your feedback is. I'll be back next week with probably some pricing strategy stuff. So that's all I got. This has been the live stream. Like I said, the effective management, most management is communication. In my experience, management is mostly effective management is mostly effective communication. Communication of beliefs, communication of expectations, communication of tasks, and receiving communication about things that the staff may not be 100% on. Though that's what management really is. It's mostly talking to other people and processing information. And that's why a lot of people struggle with it, because most people aren't the best at communicating and they're also not the best at listening. So that's all I got. Appreciate you guys. I will talk to y'all later. I'm out.